Hey guys, my name is Gabby, welcome back to my channel, and today I'm going to be filming my January wrap-up. In the month of January, I read a total of 12 books. It's been one of my best reading months in a while as far as like how many books I've read goes. As I said, I read a total of 12 books, which amounted to this many pages. Sorry, future editing me. As far as genres go that I read this month, I read 3 romance novels, 2 historical fictions, 2 thrillers, 2 sci-fis, 1 horror novel, 1 dystopian novel, and 1 non-fiction. It was kind of all over the place this month, I'm not gonna lie. As far as ratings go, I gave 2 books 5 stars, 3 books 4 stars, 4 books 3 stars, and 3 books 2 stars. So ratings were also all over the place. They were mostly on the lower end, which is kind of disappointing, but whatever. And then as far as male versus female author goes, I read 3 male authors this month and 9 female authors, which of course it's not surprising to me that there are more female authors that I'm reading. As far as checking up on my goals of 2019, I did complete my reread this month. That was Atheists Who Kneel and Pray. And I did complete reading 1 of my book of the month books. So you'll have to stay tuned to find out which one it was. Let's just jump into what I read in January. Alright, so the very first book that I finished in 2019 this year was The Perfect Nanny by Leila Slimani. And this book is an adult thriller, and it follows this nanny who, in the very first chapter of this book, you find out that this nanny murdered the 2 kids that she was watching. And then the rest of the book is kind of like seeing the buildup that led towards that event. I'm gonna be honest, I really disliked this book. And, you know, I feel like I have this curse that the first book I read in a year is always a disappointing book. I don't know what it is, but like the first book I pick up in the year is always a shat one. Yes, this book, I just feel like the most interesting part of this book was the very first chapter, and then from then on I was just so bored throughout the rest of it, so it kind of sucked. But yeah, this one was a 2-star read for me. The second book I read this year is Renegades by Marissa Meyer. This one is a young adult sci-fi slash fantasy novel about these superheroes and supervillains, and there's these people called the Renegades in their city who are like basically like the Avengers. I have like very mixed feelings about this book. Like, I'm pretty sure I ended up giving it around like a 3 out of 5 star. There was some stuff I really liked about it, and then there was some stuff I really didn't like about it. Like, for the negatives, I will say that this book feels way too long. The action scenes weren't as exciting as I wanted them to be. Like, I found myself really bored. Couldn't really really connect with the characters, and I feel like there were way too many characters because you have to memorize their superhero names and their actual names. And I just feel like this writing style was way too like young adult for my taste, which I know is such a nitpicky thing, but like, I couldn't get invested in this. Like, I don't know. And as far as things I really did enjoy about this though, I love the fact that the Renegades was founded by 2 gay men superheroes. I think that is so freaking cool. And like, one of the main boys that this book follows is the son of the 2 gay superheroes that like founded the Renegades, and I think that's like the most interesting thing about this book. I also really liked the main character, Nova. I thought she was pretty interesting, and I liked her story about her uncle and all that. Like, I don't know, I found her interesting enough, but like, so I ended up giving this one 3 out of 5 stars. It felt like a lot of build-up for the first book in a series, but not a lot of like payoff. Like, I felt like this was just the first book in a series, and you could really feel that, but like there wasn't enough to keep me interested in this. The third book I read this month is The Dreamers by Thompson, one of my most anticipated books of the year, and this one was okay. I think I built the hype for it way too much in my head. Adult sci-fi contemporary-ish kind of book that's about these girls who are mysteriously falling asleep and not waking up, and the doctors discover that while they're asleep they're experiencing really high levels of brain activity, like higher than has ever been recorded, and they know that they're dreaming, but they just don't know what they're dreaming about. This writing style is very similar to like Station 11. It's like really beautiful writing about a somewhat sci-fi thing. I thought this book would give me more answers about the sci-fi thing, which is what I was most invested in this story, but this story is actually, it feels more like a contemporary character-driven story, and it follows a bunch of different characters that are dealing with this situation in their small town. The writing in this book was so gorgeous. Like, literally, those last 2 pages of this book had such beautiful quotes that I want tattooed all over my body. I don't know, like, I just have torn feelings about this book because at the same time, I feel like I never really connected to any of the main characters because of the writing style. Like, it's just such a distant third person point of view. I don't know, I just have torn feelings about this one all around, but I ended up giving it 3 out of 5 stars. The fourth book I read this month is Sometimes I Lie by Feeney. This one is an adult thriller and it follows this girl who is in a coma. She doesn't remember how she got in a coma or why she got in a coma, but she's almost positive that her husband had something to do with it, but she's also known to be a bit of a pathological liar. I really enjoyed this book. Like, I understand that this book definitely has a lot of cliche, you know, thriller tropes and things, but I really enjoyed this actually. Like, I don't know what it was about it, but it just really drew me in. I like the fact that in alternate chapters we get this flashback diary chapter of like her childhood, and we're trying to figure out like what happened there, and there's just a lot of mystery in this book. And I don't know, I like the fact that she was an unreliable narrator because she's a pathological liar. Like, it just makes her such an interesting character in my opinion. So I ended up giving this one 4 out of 5 stars. Like, it definitely wasn't one of like the best thrillers I've ever read, but I was highly entertained when I read this. Alright, so the next book I picked up is My Favorite Half Night Stand by Christina and this was their new book that just came out in December last year, and this one follows a group of friends who are a bunch of professors. It basically kind of felt like New Girl to me, but they all were professors, like, for a college. So it follows the main character, Millie, who's kind of like Jess. She's like the only girl in their group, and then it follows a bunch of different guys. It follows like, I want to say like 4 to 6 other guys. The main one is Reid, who is her love interest in this. What's basically happening in this book is that they all want to create dating profiles to go to this event that's like held through their college, that they want to go like and have a date to this event. So all of them convince each other to make dating profiles online. Our main character, Millie, creates a fake profile because all the guys are like making fun of her actual profile, and she doesn't think she's ever going to be able to find anyone with the way that her profile is. So she kind of creates this artsy girl mysterious profile, and then on that profile she gets matched with Reid, who is like one of her best friends. And so instead of telling him that, you know, it's like LOL, it's actually me that you got matched with, she decides to like not tell him, and then it's like a story of her kind of secretly messaging him back and forth and them falling in love with each other. Well, he doesn't know that it's her. She knows that it's him. Yeah, it's basically like You've Got Mail, now that I think about it. Okay, that's my biggest negative about this book, like right up front, is that I hate books that deal with like catfishing or lying or manipulating the other character. I just think that that's very not cool. But again, like, Christina writing is just so good, and the story is so cute that I was able to look past it. But again, like, usually that's like one of my biggest pet peeves and a huge like no-no for me. Like, just in general, it's like you don't catfish someone and manipulate them into, even if it is like it's you and you had a real connection, like that's still super fucked up, and I do not support that ever. I don't know, I just thought this story was really cute, and I did relate a lot to Millie because, like, despite her catfishing, like, I just found her really relatable in the sense that she's like, how will I ever know that I'm a relationship person? And like all of her insecurities are like things that I deal with on a daily basis. So I just found her very relatable. She even had this one quote that I was like, holy shit, did I just get called out in a novel? And it's when she says, I'm lonely because I don't tell people what I need or what I want, and then I get hurt when they don't figure it out on their own. And I was like, holy shit, dude, if that ain't me. I just thought this novel was really cute, and I really adored Reid so much, and I liked their romance when they were being genuine and being like them, you know? But again, I did have an issue with the catfishing in this book, so I ended up giving it 4 out of 5 stars just because I had to knock off a star because of how much the catfishing aspect of this irritated me. But I did really like the story. Like, I thought it was really cute. So the next book I was able to read this month was Daisy Jones and the Six by Jenkins Reid. And I know you're probably wondering, how did you read this early? I wanted to give a huge shout out to my friend on Twitter, Kristin's Books, who had an arc of it and she sent it to me. Nicest human being ever. Oh my god, shout out, thank you. This book, if you've seen any of my recent videos, then you know that this was my #1 most anticipated book of 2019. Unfortunately, I ended up being pretty disappointed by this one. It follows this band in the 1970s called Daisy Jones and the Six. It's very like Fleetwood Mac vibes in my opinion. The reason why I was so disappointed by this book and what I didn't know going into this book is that this entire freaking novel The entire thing is told in interview clips. What I was expecting going into this was just going to be some epic story told from Daisy's point of view, the way kind of like Evelyn Hugo is. The entire story is interview clips of like some interviewer interviewing the band when they're like old, and then them talking about like, oh yeah, the good old days when we just had sex and did drugs all the time, and yeah, that's all we did. And I feel like Daisy wasn't even the main character of this book. I feel like it was, what's his name, and Camille, like the backup guitarist. I don't know, like I was not invested in this story at all because of the writing style. Like the writing style was excruciating. I was so bored out of my freaking mind. This is not what I thought it was gonna be at all. So I'm like hella disappointed in this. But if I had known going into it that the entire book was like interview clips basically, I don't think I would have been as highly hyped for this book as I was. Like I just didn't know it was like that going into it. So the 7th book I picked up this month was Dr. Perfect by Peter Stiles. This one is a male romance that follows these 2 doctors. It's a male romance and it follows 2 doctors, and that's really freaking awesome. And it was awesome in that sense, but it's also like this book kind of turns into this like mystery almost unexpectedly, because one of the male doctors that this is following accidentally kills one of his patients. Then it becomes kind of this like thriller mystery story about like that, what happened there, and like him, the other doctor, trying to like get him through this like legal obstacle. This was okay. It was interesting, I guess. I ended up giving this one 3 out of 5 stars. Like it was alright as far as male romances go, but like I don't know, it's just like very strange at times. The 8th book that I read this month was The Nightingale by Kristin Hannah. Finally read it, you guys. I read it. Like I've been saying I'm gonna read this book since like October. This book fucking slayed my heart and my soul, and I'm never gonna love anything ever again. My first 5 out of 5 in 2019, and honestly nothing is gonna compare to this book now. If you don't know, this book is a historical fiction novel that takes place during World War II, and it follows these 2 sisters, Vianne and Isabel. I don't even know how to explain this book without wanting to sob. I am not a huge historical fiction fan, but I was so hella invested in this, and honestly, after reading this book, I am a lot more interested in reading more historical fiction, and especially like World War II historical fiction, because like I haven't really read a lot. And anytime that I do read about like World War II, it makes me feel so incredibly sad and hollow, and like I just hate that feeling. But like I don't know, like after this book, like I just really have like a desire to want to read more of it. It was just so good. And like there were some scenes in this book, like at the end, I literally set this book down and was like sobbing. Like it was just so sad. I haven't cried like that over a book in so long. Like I kind of feel like after I finished reading this the way I felt when I finished reading A Little Life. And so that's just kind of telling you right there, like this is definitely one of the most depressing books I've ever read. It's up there with A Little Life, it is. Isabel and Vianne are 2 of my favorite female characters to ever exist. I just love them both so much. I kind of love the way that this book talks about how whenever we think about war, we always like associate men with war, and how we don't ever really appreciate what females are doing behind the scenes in a war. Just that whole discussion about like feminism in the war, I think is so important in this book, and it's so powerful, so good. So if you haven't read The Nightingale, freaking read The Nightingale. It's so amazing. All the hype is well deserved for this one. Alright, so the 9th book I read this month. Took a minute for me to read another book after The Nightingale, not gonna lie, I didn't want to read anything. So the next book I read was Becoming by Michelle Obama. I got this one on Audible, and I couldn't physically read anything after The Nightingale, so my next few reads were audiobooks because I couldn't even deal with anything. Becoming by Michelle Obama is a non-fiction memoir about Michelle Obama, and it's like her story of like her life and her childhood and her time before she was in the office and meeting Barack Obama, and then like in the office and after the office. It's just her life story basically, and I absolutely loved it. I don't know, I think Michelle Obama is like such an inspiration, and I loved getting to hear more about her childhood and like how she met Barack. I thought it was like so cute the way she like like described him, hearing about all the pressures that they faced when they were in the office and like the strain that it put on their marriage at times. Like, oh my god, it was just so inspiring, and like her voice is just so pleasant to listen to. I ended up giving this one 4 out of 5 stars, and like the only reason why it didn't get a 5 out of 5 for me is because I felt like this was a very long book. Like, it was over 19 hours of an audiobook, and I don't feel like it needed to be that long. I feel like there was some sections that definitely could have been cut out. And then the 10th book I read right after that was Elevation by Stephen King. This is also one that I got off of Audible, and I just listened to the audiobook. It was a short-ish audiobook. It was only like 5 hours, I want to say. This is classified as a horror novel for some reason, even though I don't understand why. This is a story that follows this man who is like rapidly losing weight, but he's not getting any smaller. The doctors are trying to figure out what's wrong with him, and he's like losing weight so rapidly that he thinks one day he's gonna eventually get to 0 and become weightless. Yeah, this book was just very strange, and I wasn't really a fan, and I didn't understand how this was even considered horror. Like, this won the Goodreads award for horror last year. I feel like Stephen King books are either a hit or a miss for me, and this one was definitely a miss. Alright, the 11th book I read this month was Atheists Who Kneel and Pray by Tarryn Fisher. This was my reread of the month. It wasn't exactly a 5 out of 5. It was probably more of a 4.5 this time, to be honest, but I still really enjoyed myself while reading this book, and this is a romance novel. Her writing is just so addictive and unique and just like the best. This story follows this girl named Yera, who's a British bartender, and she's living in Seattle, and then it also follows her love interest David, who is a musician, and he's looking for his next muse, and then he finds Yera and he convinces her to be his next muse, and she has permission to break his heart. I know it's like such a cliche setup for a romance novel, but this book is just so great. Alright, and the last book that I read this month, Golden State by Ben H. Winters, and this was one of my January Book of the Month selections, and so I did complete reading a January Book of the Month selection, which was part of my 2019 goals. You know, I was gonna read the one that I said I was gonna read, The Silent Patient, but that one, the writing was just so dull, and I could not get into it for the life of me. Like, it was really putting me in a slump, so I put that one aside. So I picked up the Golden State, even though this one's definitely outside of my comfort zone because it's a dystopian novel and it's just not something I would have been interested in just hearing that. But it takes place in a futuristic California. This main character is a police officer of sorts, but he is a police officer that specifically detects lies in people, and in this world it's illegal to lie, and these people, like our main character, can feel and they like know when somebody is lying. Like, they can have like, they have like a sixth sense or something where they can like sense that somebody is lying, and then they go and like arrest them for that lie, and like you face jail time in this book when you lie. Fucking crazy. Okay, this book is so strange, and it was so interesting though. All the characters in this book, when they approach each other, they like have to say things that are true to each other, I guess, just to confirm that they're like speaking the truth. So they'll just walk up to each other and be like, 2 times 2 is 4, and then the other person will be like, and 3 times 2 is 6, and they're like, and as it should be, and they're like, yeah, and they're like, how can I help you? You know, like, it's so strange. It kind of reminded me a lot of Fahrenheit 451. They were like, can you imagine the alternative where you hear one thing from somebody and then something from somebody else, and you'll never be able to know the actual truth? And like, that's saying a lot about our world, I feel like. Like, yeah, there are so many situations that we don't actually know the truth about. Like, we speculate a lot and we lie a lot as a culture, and it's like, it's so fascinating to see what a world would look like without any of that, like to live in a world of absolute truth. But then unfortunately the second half of this book, like part 2, just started getting so weird and strange, and it just kind of like went off the rails into like almost a different story, and it just felt very weird. I don't know, I wasn't a huge fan of this ending. I feel like it really dropped the ball on what was otherwise a very interesting story. And so I ended up giving this one 3 out of 5 stars. Like, I definitely still think that this is something worth reading just because it is very thought-provoking. These covers are freaking gorgeous. Ah, so beautiful. Look at all of the blue. It's all blue. How many books did you read in January? What was your favorite book that you read this month? By far, my favorite book is The Nightingale, and I think nothing will ever quite live up to this, but because of this book, I'm actually interested in reading a lot more historical fiction, and I've been taking down a lot of historical fiction recommendations from people, and I've purchased a couple different historical fiction novels to read next month. Let me know what your thoughts are on any of these books that I mentioned. Thank you so much for watching as always, and I will see you guys next time with a new video.